Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of Betsy Faria. And when I tell you, this is one of the most wild cases that I've ever looked into. It has just everything. It has a wrongful conviction. It has a murderer almost walking free. It has murders to cover up the fact that you're guilty of other murders. It has insurance money. It has everything. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, like this week. And I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. Alright, now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can go ahead and get into this video. Now, today's video is one of my condensed crime videos. And if you are unfamiliar, my condensed crime videos are for people who are into short form content, people who just want to get in, get out, and get on their way, or for just people who already watch my channel and want to see a little bit more of me throughout the week. So if you're not into the shorter videos and you want my long form content, don't worry, that still comes out every single Monday where I do deep dives, two-parters, all that jazz is on Monday. So today I'm going to tell you the story about the murder of Betsy Faria. And at the end of the video, I'm going to ask you a question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your head while we go through all the details. But the question of the day is this. Do you believe that now the right person has been arrested for Betsy's murder? After you hear all the details, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. And now with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of Betsy Faria. On December 27th, 2011, a frantic call came into 911 from a man saying that his wife had killed herself. When police show up at the home, they kind of look at the scene and they were like, killed herself? Where? Because when they looked at 42-year-old Betsy Faria, she was in horrible condition. Her wrists were slashed all the way to her bone, and she was covered in stab wounds. 55 stab wounds, dude. She was stabbed in the head, she was stabbed through her eye, and in her throat. She was stabbed in her throat, and the killer had left the knife in her neck, and another knife was found next to her on the couch. It was also clear to police that Betsy had been dead a little while when they got the call because her blood had started to dry and her body had started to stiffen. So police are looking at Betsy's husband a little weird. Russ Faria is looking a bit strange to them for a couple of reasons. One, the fact that he could look at the scene and assume that she had done this to herself was weird, and just his overall demeanor didn't sit quite right with investigators. So they had him in their line of vision. Tunnel vision, some might say, but why would Russell want to kill his wife? Could it be for her life insurance money? But was he even the person listed as her beneficiary? Let's get into that all now. Elizabeth K. Meyer, who went by Betsy, was born on March 24th, 1969, the same year as my mother, which is ironic because Betsy actually physically reminds me of my mother. And Betsy was born to parents Kenneth and Janet Meyer in Missouri. She was one of 4 daughters, her, Mary, Julie, and Pamela, lots of girls, sounds exhausting, and they were known as being good daughters, a good family, a family that was well known in their community and well liked. Betsy herself had a lot of friends and a great social life, and she was also like the type of person to make lifelong friends, and she was still, at the age of 42, friends with people that she had met in high school. As Betsy got older, she actually went on to be a DJ, which I thought was pretty fun, and she would DJ at her friends' weddings, and she was said to be very good at it, and she was also said to be like a very good dancer, and she would get down and dance with people as well. She was like a big party animal. She was very happy and very light and very friendly and very helpful. She just had this air about her. She was the type of person who would always be there for you if you needed her. Like a person you could rely on. She was somebody who made you feel comfortable and loved in her presence, whether you were somebody who knew her a while or somebody who was just meeting her. She was just that kind of person. Betsy was also a mother. She had 2 daughters, and this was something that she took great joy in. She always wanted to be a mama, and now she was. And even though like the relationship between Betsy and the girls' pops hadn't really worked out, she still had like a lot of life to live and a lot of love to give. And she finally found somebody to give that to when she met her husband, Russell Faria. He was just about a year younger than Betsy, and the two just really hit it off. He was said to be a nice man and somebody who was a good match to Betsy. He kind of had her light energy. He rode a motorcycle. He dressed a little, they just like when you looked at them next to each other, you were like, yeah, I see that. That makes sense. You ride a motorcycle, you're a DJ, you two hang out, you have fun, and that just works. The two went on to get married in January of the year 2000, and things were going really well for them. By the time things took a really shitty turn for Russ and Betsy, things were going really well. Russell, he went by Russ. He was working in IT. Betsy was working in insurance. They were happy. They were in love. They'd been together a decade. They were trying to buy a house. But then the other shoe dropped, and in the worst way possible, because Betsy was diagnosed with breast cancer. Betsy was really sad, and she was also really scared. She was scared to die, you know. She was scared to leave her love and to leave her daughters and to leave her family. And I can't even imagine what that would be like. It sounds terrifying, but by all accounts, she did the best she could with what she had. She went to her chemo appointments. She tried to keep her head up. And when she went to these appointments, she was like surrounded by people who loved her. She hardly ever had to go anywhere by herself. She always had somebody with her or somebody who was going to be with her right afterwards. She just was made to not feel like she was going through this alone. And it seems like the type of thing that could feel very isolating. She kept her mindset positive, and even though she was going through chemo, she was also looking forward to the future, and her and Russ did go on to buy that house that they wanted. They bought it in Troy, Missouri, and by the end of the year, they got great news. Betsy's cancer was in remission. Now, in true Betsy fashion, you know, the fun-loving lady, she wanted to celebrate this. She was so happy, you know what I mean? Like, that has to be the best news you could get in the situation you're in. So she's like, you know what I want to do? I want to go on a cruise. I want to book a cruise. I want everybody I love to come. I want to go and I want to swim with the dolphins. That was something that she was on her bucket list, right? She wanted to do that her entire life. She wanted to do that before she was no longer here. So she's like, let's do it. Let's go celebrate me, guys, and let's go on a cruise. So she did. She booked the cruise. Her friends, her family, a bunch of people were going. Everybody was happy. Everybody was like stoked. And then a month before they were supposed to go on the cruise, Betsy got news that the cancer was back, and it was worse this time. It had spread to her liver, and I believe her kidneys as well. And that is, you know, it's essentially a death sentence, which is so messed up, dude. Like, cancer, you know what I mean? Like, truly. And it can happen so fast. I'm not going to get into it, but it can happen so fast, and it's so devastating to see happen. So now Betsy, knowing that her time was sort of limited, she decided that she was still going to go on her cruise. She was going to take advantage of this time to spend it with all the people she was closest with, right? That was the point in the first place. So she's like, you know what, I'm still going to go. And she did. She went, she had a great time. She swam with the dolphins. She did exactly what she wanted to do. Then she came back and she had to go on with, you know, normal life, as normal as it was. And she did the best that she could. Time went on. She was still going to her chemo treatment. She was still making the best out of the situation she was in. The holidays came, Christmas came, and she spent it with her family, and she had a good holiday, as good as it could be with the amount of pain she was in. But then 2 days after Christmas, on December 27th, Betsy would die, and it wouldn't be at the hands of her cancer. Her cancer wouldn't kill her. She was brutally murdered. So now we come to that day. It's December 27th. Russ comes home. He finds Betsy the way she is. He calls the police, and he tells them he thinks that she killed herself. So police are looking at Russ with suspicion, of course. Like, first off, he's the husband. And how often is it the husband? All the time it's the husband. So they're looking at him for that. And the fact that he thought she had killed herself, people thought it was pretty ridiculous that he could assume that, to see that scene and think that. In addition to that, he wasn't really crying, though he seemed emotional. They thought he was faking it. And for the record, Russ did try to explain, like, why he thought that she had killed herself. And it's because the cancer and the chemo had really been weighing on her, and she had gotten herself into like a dark place mentally with everything that was going on with her. And she had confided in her husband that she would be better off if she just died, because she wouldn't have to go through the pain, and he and her kids wouldn't have to sit there and watch her deteriorate. So he was like, this is why I think that she may have done this. But police were still skeptical. And if that wasn't bad enough, when they were searching the house, they also found a piece of evidence that really didn't make him look good. They found a pair of bloody men's slippers thrown in the couple's closet, like in the back of the closet, like they were trying to be hid. So police are like, I think you did this guy. And they actually bring him down to the station so that they can question/interrogate him. And they interrogate him for 10 hours. And in that time, he gives them his alibi. Russ tells police that that night he had plans to have dinner with his mother, which is something he did like every week. He was then going to go to a game night with a bunch of his friends while Betsy went to her chemo appointment. She was being dropped off by her mom, and then he was going to pick her up after it was done. He said that he had gotten a text from Betsy saying that she didn't need a ride anymore, that her friend Pam was going to be giving her a ride home, but that she didn't have her key, so she asked Russ if he would just leave the door unlocked for her. Russ tells police that he left his house at about 5 p.m. and he stopped to get gas. And he said he realized that the window of going to have dinner with his mom and going with his friends wasn't going to be big enough, so he called his mom. He canceled on her. He then drove to another store where he got cigarettes and some like beverages. Which were the beverages? It doesn't matter. Cigarettes and beverages. And then he went to get another store and got dog food. So he went to 3 different stores. He then went to his friend's house where they hung out. They like drank. I don't know if they drank actually. I know they smoked. You know, just hung out, did guy things. And then he left at about 9 p.m. He got home at 9:30 and that's when he found Betsy. So in hearing his alibi, they're like, that's a lot of stops, which was weird to them. But they're like, you know what? You say the last person she was with was this person named Pam who was supposed to drive her home. So now we want to go and talk to Pam, right? Since she's supposed to be the last person who saw Betsy alive. So they go and they talk to Pam. Now, who's Pam? Pam Hupp was Betsy's relatively new, as in not friend since high school friend, like, because Betsy had a lot of friends since high school. She was newer than that. She was a friend that, you know, her and Betsy had gotten pretty close, especially since Betsy getting sick. Pam was a mother, and when she was just coming out of high school, she found out that she was pregnant. Like, that's how she became a mother. Her and her then boyfriend, like her high school boyfriend, got married for their baby daughter, but it didn't work out because it seems like they only got married for, you know, the baby, and so they separated. Pam was the type of person who, though she loved her daughter, because she did, I mean, I think she did, I don't know her, she also had a hard time realizing that, like, her life just hadn't really turned out the way she had expected it, and, like, things didn't go exactly how she thought they would because she had a child so young, which I think is a relatable thing. I mean, I don't know, I had my baby, you know, last year, so a year ago. But anyway, she's going on with the life she has, right? She has this life. This is the life she's living. She's doing it. She ends up meeting a new man. His name is Mark Hupp. They get married. That's how she became Pam Hupp. He's got a good job, so they live comfortably for a while. They end up moving to Missouri, where then Pam gets a job in insurance, which is where she met Betsy. So the two worked together for a while. That's how they met. And then Pam ended up leaving the job because she got an injury and just started collecting disability. So her and Betsy had sort of separated, but then when Betsy got sick, they reconnected and now they were close. Pam seemed like a very good friend to Betsy. They were together a lot. She wanted to be right by Betsy's side and do everything she could to help her. And she seemed like she did. She was with her all the time. She would take her to her appointments. She would take her wherever she needed to go. Anytime she needed a ride, she's like, yeah, girl, like, come on, let's go. And they ended up being together, like, often. Very, very often. It got to the point that Betsy started to like confide in Pam. Pam was the type of person that was reliable. You know, the type of person that people leaned on. She was known to take care of her sick mother, and now she was taking care of Betsy. She seemed on the outside to be the type of person who just liked to help those in need, you know? So police asked Pam, like, okay, what happened that night? Because you were the last person supposedly to have seen her alive. So what was up? And she's like, yeah, I was with her. I went to chemo with her, and then I dropped her off at her house at about 7, and then I just went home and I hung out with my husband. But it did seem that Pam had taken like great lengths. Like she had really gone out of her way to be the person that brought Betsy home, but maybe she's just like a nice lady, you know, I don't know. I mean, I do know, but I don't know. Anyways, she tells police that when she dropped Betsy off that night, all the lights were off in the house, but that she believed Russ was home at the time because she thought she saw his car like in the driveway. And she says that she did feel a little bit weird about dropping Betsy off because she knew Betsy wanted to have a conversation with Russ that might have been like a tense conversation. And this worried her because Russ was like an angry and violent man who had a drinking problem. So she was a little skeptical, a little like, about leaving Betsy there alone with him, knowing it could get tense, but that she did it anyway. She even went as far as telling police that Russ had like made up this quote game where he would smother Betsy with a pillow so that she would know what it was like to die. Like she told police that Betsy was thinking about leaving Russ and that she didn't want to spend the rest of her life knowing that she was, you know, not going to be here that much longer. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life with somebody like Russ. And police are hearing this, and they already are suspecting Russ, so they're like, whoa. She also tells them something else that's pretty interesting. She tells police that Betsy had confided in her or something else. I mean, like leaving the husband, him being abusive and all that. That's a lot to confide in somebody. But she also confided in Pam that she was worried about her life insurance policy. She was worried that when she died, all of her money was going to go to Russ, and she did not want that to happen. She wanted her daughters to be taken care of, but she didn't want like Russ to get the money. So Betsy and Pam decided that Pam would be now the beneficiary of Betsy's life insurance policy. Like, they did the paperwork so that Pam would be the person who would inherit her money when she passed, so that she could then, you know, divvy it amongst her daughters and like take care of that, so Russ didn't have his hands on it. So they did it. Signed, sealed, delivered. They changed the documents to Pam, and a week later, Betsy was killed. Police do talk to Pam about the insurance situation because, like, it looks shady, right? It looks super shady for it to be switched right before she died, and the fact that only Betsy and Pam knew about it. But when it was kind of presented to Pam that maybe she could be involved, she was just like, she shut that shit down so quick. She's like, what the fuck? Like, no. One, if I wanted money, I have people in my family who have, you know, more insurance. Like, I could get more money from people in my family. If I wanted somebody dead, I could take care of them. I don't need to kill somebody that's just my friend. And two, if I was going to kill somebody for their life insurance money, don't you think I'd put a little more time between them signing it and them dying? Like, that would make me look suspicious. And when I thought about this, immediately just now, I was like, what is it? Basic Instinct. Remember, she was like, if you've seen it, she was like, would I really write about killing somebody a certain way and then kill somebody the exact way I described in my book? That would make me a suspect. But she did do it. Pam. I wonder if she was into that movie. I don't know. But anyways, police hear this and they're like, yeah, it totally makes sense. Like, they did not consider her a suspect at all. They thought she was honest and sincere and believable. And plus, they already had somebody in their sights that they thought was responsible for this. Police are convinced that Russ is responsible for his wife's murder. So in January of 2012, he was arrested and he was charged with first-degree murder. Now, at first, people who knew Russ and Betsy were totally shocked. Like, they did not believe it was possible that he had anything to do with this. They were like, people who knew them were like, I don't see it. But as time went on, suggestibility ensued. And after a while, people really believed that this was exactly what happened. Now, Russ gets an attorney, as one does when they're being tried for murder. And as soon as they start looking at the case, like, you know, they do the discovery, they get everything, they're like, they were just surprised that he was really being tried for this because police didn't really seem to have any evidence on him at all. Okay, well, not at all. They just didn't have much evidence against Russ. Russ had an alibi. He was with friends until 9 p.m. and this was 20 miles away. And his cell phone proved that it was over there, okay? As did the receipts that he had because he had stopped at so many places throughout the night. And when police arrived at the house, he had no blood on him, even though he was still wearing the clothes that he had been wearing out that night. It just didn't make sense. Like, how could he have gotten home, killed her, cleaned up, and called police in that short window of time? On top of that, his defense noticed that police didn't really look into Pam at all, even though she seemed like somebody you might want to look into. They didn't test her for blood. They didn't test her car for blood. They took her DNA, but they didn't test it against anything. And they were really passive in their interview with her, even kind of like friendly. And on top of that, her cell phone record showed that she had been in the area of Betsy's murder for 30 minutes after she said that she dropped her off. Despite this, though, the defense was not allowed to bring this stuff up at trial. They were not allowed to bring Pam up as like a potential guilty party. They weren't even allowed to mention that Pam was the person who was the beneficiary, of Betsy's life insurance policy. Which is like, really? Because I see some cases, I've seen trials where that's allowed, but in this one it was not. Anyways, the case goes to trial. And the prosecution's whole like spiel when it came to Russ was that he killed Betsy to inherit her life insurance money, which is ironic considering. But it wasn't good for him because Betsy's daughters actually testified against him. They said that Russ and their mom didn't actually have that great of a relationship, which they said later that they were told that they had to testify, and if they didn't do it, they'd be subpoenaed. I don't know about that, but they basically told the court, like, they didn't have a good relationship. They fought all the time. Another thing that didn't look good for Russ, but that I think is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my entire life, is that, okay, the prosecution tried to imply that the reason Russ had such a great alibi is because his friends helped him. They literally were like, here's what he did. He left his phone with his friends while he went and murdered his wife. His friends, you know, had the phone so it could do the pings, so it would show he was in that area. And they went and they made purchases so that he would have a paper trail for his alibi. That's what they said. That's what they said. Is that ridiculous? To me, that's just like, I don't know. I'm sure it's happened. I haven't covered a case where it's happened, but I was just like, did you stretch before you took that leap, bro? Anyways, the trial concluded. The jury was sent to deliberate. They deliberate for less than 5 hours before they come back with their verdict. They had found Russell Faria guilty of his wife's murder. So he was given life in prison plus 30 years with no possibility of parole. How there is no reasonable doubt, how no reasonable doubt was raised, I don't know. It makes no sense to me. I'm like, what? But that's what happened. Now, time goes on, but some weirdness definitely happens during the time that Russ is in jail and Pam's just, doing her thing. And one of these things is that Pam's mom dies in what was considered an accident, but has since been viewed as quite suspicious, because what happened is that Pam and her mom were hanging out. Pam had taken her mom to like an appointment and then brought her home to spend the night with her, and then brought her back to the assisted living facility where she was living the next day. When she brought her back there, she told the staff, like, don't bother her for a while. She's not feeling very well. Give her some time, give her some space. Once the people who worked there finally went to like check on her, they found that she was dead. She had fallen from her 3rd-story balcony, and at the time she had 8 times the normal amount of Ambien in her system. Pam was the last one with her. Pam is the one who would benefit from her death. Now, there is a lot more to go into there, but this is condensed crime, so I'm not going to get into that today. We're talking about one murder here, and that's the murder of Betsy. But I'm just letting you know that happened, so you're not like, well, I know that happened, so why didn't you say anything? That happened. And now Pam's out living her life, and Russ is in prison. But as time goes on, Betsy's daughters start to kind of change gears, and they start looking at the situation with a new lens, with time and perspective. And they start thinking that Pam likely had something to do with their mother's murder. So they actually file a wrongful death suit against Pam. Now, they likely did this in part because you remember that Pam got Betsy's life insurance money, and that was with the understanding that she would take that money and put it in like a trust so that she could take care of Betsy's daughters, right? She got all that money. I think it was like $150,000. Well, guess what? She didn't do that. She didn't give the girls any money and instead bought herself a new house. So now it's 2015, and Russ ends up getting a new trial after a motion was filed that would make it so that new evidence could be admitted in trial. So he gets a new trial, and a bunch of stuff is admitted, like the fact that apparently, like, the prosecutor in the first trial was having an affair with one of the lead investigators. So it was just like a conflict of interest. It was real messy. And in addition to that, they were able to admit some photos of the crime scene that somehow just like weren't included at the initial trial. And in these photos, you could see that it was very unlikely that Russ had cleaned up the crime scene at all. So if he did it and he didn't clean up, then how was he so clean, bro? Like, the math wasn't mathing. Additionally, this time they were able to admit, all the information about Pam, that was heard. Because this time the case wasn't being heard by a jury, it was being heard just by a judge. And the judge wanted to hear it all. And this probably made the difference for Russ because he was acquitted of all charges and he was a free man. And of course, upon being released, Russ filed a hella lawsuit, as he rightfully should have, saying like, you didn't investigate my wife's murder properly, you ignored evidence that could have kept me out of jail, all around, you fucked around, and now you're finding out. And I don't know how much he was asking for, but I read that he was awarded $2 million. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, the response to Russ being released was split. Some people thought that it was bull crap and that a murderer was being set free, while others started looking at it being like, maybe Pam Hupp has something to do with this. Now, what's super wild in this case is between the time of Russ being released and Pam being arrested, because spoiler alert, she doesn't get away with this. Pam goes out and murders another man to cover up or get police off her tracks for her murdering Betsy. This was a man named Louis Gumpenberger. Louis was 33 years old and a father of 2, and he was a really good guy, like a loved man, close with his family, close with his mother. He had gotten injured, though, at some point in his life. He had gotten into a car accident, and it had caused him some physical and mental issues, and because of this, it made it hard for him to hold down a steady job, but he still needed to work, so he would take odd jobs here and there to support himself, and this is how he crossed paths with Pam. Pam lured Louis to her house under false pretenses, offering him work, and then she murdered him. She shot him to death and then planted a letter, like a letter on his body that said like from Russ. It was like written from Russ's point of view. And it was telling Louis to essentially go to Pam's house, kidnap her, take her to the bank, get Russ's money, and then to murder Pam, and to make sure to make the murder look like Betsy's murder, even saying that he should leave the knife sticking out of her neck. He also had $900 on him along with that note, and in the note it said that he'd get another like $10,000 once the job was done. It's just so crazy, dude. But police were able to tell pretty easily in her interrogation that her story was bullshit and that she had used this murder to try to make, Russ look guilty again to cover up the fact that she killed Betsy. And like, I watched this interrogation and it's so weird, dude. She seems so like confident, but also not as shaken as one may expect. Like if somebody had just come to your house and tried to kill you and then you killed him in self-defense, which is what she was saying happened, you would expect her to be more shooken up, but she wasn't. And police just didn't believe it. And they were able to tear apart her story pretty quickly. Like the money that Louis had on him were sequential bills and Pam had the other bills in her house. The paper that the hit instructions were written on were from like a paper pad in Pam's home. Okay, just like with the John Benet Ramsey thing, the note was written inside the house kind of thing. And the knife that Louis had on him when he showed up, they were able to track down where the purchase was, and it was bought at like a dollar store by Pam. So Pam is finally arrested in August of 2016, and she's charged with Louis's murder. So they put her in an interrogation room, and they leave her there for a second. And while she's sitting there, you see her, because I saw this on video too, you see her kind of like casually grab a pen. And then she's sitting there and she casually like feels around on her neck. And then she asks to go to the bathroom. And while in the bathroom, she took this pen and she jabbed it into her own neck and into her own wrists in an attempt to take her life so she wouldn't have to answer for what she had done. But sucks to suck Pam, they were able to like save her. They were able to stop her from, succeeding in taking her life. And now she was going to have to answer for the crimes she committed. And it seems like her doing this, like it doesn't seem like, well, yeah, I guess it seems like, because we don't know. But her doing this really makes it seem like she knows that she's guilty, right? Like, you're going to try to kill yourself if you're innocent? I don't think so. This is an admission of guilt. That was a bad sentence, but I'm going to lean with it and rock with it. You know me, or you don't if you're new. Hi. So Pam eventually went to trial, and at first she pled not guilty, but the death penalty was on the table, so she ended up changing it up, and she took an Alford plea, which I don't think I've done a case with an Alford plea. I know of cases that have done them. Yeah, but basically an Alford plea is where a person is saying, I'm innocent, but you guys have a lot on me, man. You have enough to get a conviction, and so I'm going to take this Alford plea, which essentially means I'm innocent, but you guys could get me if you wanted to. So in doing this, the death penalty was taken off the table, and instead she was given life in prison. And she claimed that she did this, that she, pled to something that she didn't do because she didn't want her kids to have to watch her go through a messy trial. So now, police know that Pam is a murderer, and they know that she would go this far to try to cover up her crime. So they're like, what we should do? We should probably look into her and see if she's connected to her mother's death, right? This accidental fall. We should see if she's, connected to that. And we should also look into her more thoroughly in Betsy's murder. So they do. They look into her in those two cases, and they're like, shit, we should have probably looked into her sooner. I know that her mother's case was changed from accidental to undetermined. I believe this was in 2018. But from what I've seen online, it doesn't look like they're actually going to try to prosecute her for her mother's death. So right now that one's kind of at a halt. But they did look into her in connection with Betsy's murder, and they're like, huh. So they finally bring her in to question her. And this time they're questioning her as a suspect and not just like having a nice conversation with her. And in response to this interrogation, she was charged with Betsy's murder. Pam Hupp was charged with the first-degree murder of Betsy Faria over a decade later. Wow, like how could it take that long? It's just crazy. But in response to this, her husband, Pam's husband, filed for divorce. He was like, oh, what the fuck? They stated that Pam had really planned this whole thing. She had purposely chosen a day that she knew that Russ would be out of the house. A day that she knew Betsy would be so weak and exhausted from chemo that she would be vulnerable and that Pam would be able to do this. She waited, this is what they believe, that she waited for Betsy to fall asleep on the couch and then attacked her in her sleep. And the county prosecutor dude was like blown away with how shitty this case was handled, and was like blown away that they didn't realize that Pam was the murderer in the first place because it was so obvious. They said that the evidence was there the whole time, but that ego made it so that the officers looked the wrong way. And he said it was one of the worst investigations he'd ever seen, and then said they'd be looking into the investigation to see if they could possibly prosecute for police misconduct. And it looks like they've already started filing charges against their own, which is something that we simply do not see enough. They're talking evidence disposal, coaching witnesses to lie, stalking, and harassment. So some people are in trouble over this, for sure. And man, to me, it seems like they are going to be able to like get some people behind bars, because it turns out they were able to prove that witnesses had been asked to lie in court. Like, that's something that happened. And after Russ was acquitted, evidence was all of a sudden destroyed. Russ came out after and said that it meant like a lot to him to have his feelings validated, like, because clearly this is what had happened. And for him to hear them say that they like messed up was great, but it cost him years of his life. And he then said that Pam is an evil, evil woman because he believes that Pam is responsible. And he even compared Pam to Charles Manson. I wonder if he knows that Charles Manson didn't kill anybody. Well, Charles Manson might have killed one person, but that's not what we're talking about today. Betsy's daughters have come out since all of this happened too, and have said that, you know, the police's shitty investigation really like destroyed their lives. Not only did they lose their mother, who was murdered, and their mother didn't get justice, but they also, due to this investigation, lost their relationship with their father, their like stepfather, the person that they knew as their father, because, you know, it's an awkward conversation at the dinner table when you were a witness for the prosecution and helped get him behind bars. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really shitty situation, and it wouldn't have happened if it had been, you know, investigated properly. So what now? We're waiting for Pam to go to trial. She did waive her preliminary hearing, which is weird for somebody who is going up against the death penalty, because the preliminary hearing kind of gives the defense an opportunity to see like what the prosecution's cooking up. But she waived it, and this is said, like, I read that this is like a strategic move. What the strategy is, I have no idea. Her trial was also transferred to Greene County, Missouri, so that they could try to get an unbiased jury pool, which both sides did agree to. And by now it's anticipated that her murder trial will begin in 2024. So that's what we have so far. That's where we're gonna let it lie. I'm very curious to see the trial. Maybe I'll do an update video or like a long form video on this once we have all the information. I don't know, I'll play it by ear. But for now, I want to revisit the question of the day. And that was this. Do you believe that now the correct person has been arrested for the murder of Betsy Faria? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. But anyways, guys, that is it. That is the story of the murder of Betsy Faria. I hope you found it informative and it made sense. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering Betsy, Shirley, and Louis with me today, because what happened to them is tragic. And to have all of them tangled up in this Pam Hupp web of, you know, it's just, it's shocking to me to look at her. You're like, really? It's just shocking. Before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a suggestion down below of what case you would like to see me cover in the future. If you know, I have a long list of cases, and every time you leave me a suggestion, I put your name next to it. So if I cover it, I can give you a shout out, because I like looking into the cases you guys suggest, because I know you're filled with good ideas or good taste. Otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week like this week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you. If you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my membership. If you join the membership, you get early access to non-sponsored videos, occasional live streams, comment responses, like priority comment responses, because I'm a busy mother, and all that kind of stuff. If you go, you'll see it. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.